You are among the 121 members of the House who have either demanded that Attorney General Eric Holder resign or have given him a vote of no confidence. But he is still there, and he's insisting that this investigation is all about politics. Your thoughts?
Well, it is from his standpoint. He's right from his standpoint. It's all about politics. For some of us, we kind of take it seriously when a government program results in the death of any Americans because it was so poorly thought out and managed. And so to have an attorney general trying to stay in office when anybody with any kind of sense of propriety would have long since said, I'm sorry, this was a terrible tragedy. If I didn't know about it, I should have. I take full responsibility. That's what an appropriate attorney general would do, even if he didn't know about it. But there are so many questions about the credibility of this attorney general because he keeps changing his story on when he knew something and what he knew, and he keeps refusing to produce documents to show what he's done. Well, that is clearly all about politics. So from his unilateral standpoint, he's right. From his standpoint, it is about politics. From most of our standpoint, though, this is about what's right for America, what's right about standing firm when Americans are under attack. We have an obligation. We all took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And this guy seems to be on the wrong side of being a friend to Americans because he keeps standing in the way of full disclosure of what happened in this and what exactly he knew. I mean, for heaven's sake, we ought to be a better neighbor to Mexico than this as well. We demand that they clean up Mexico, get rid of the crime, and yet this administration helps the crime and doesn't even bother to apologize, too busy apologizing to people over birth control than they are to apologize to national leaders of Mexico about getting their citizens killed.
Yeah.
It's really ridiculous. It's time somebody fessed up, owned up, and did a responsible thing and stepped aside so we get somebody that knows what they're doing to look at this issue.
Well, I got to ask you, because now Congressman Dan Boren is now the first Democrat refusing to comment openly whether he still has confidence in Holder. What do you make of that?
Well, I make of it what I think of Dan Boren. I mean, Dan actually grew up, a good bit of his growing up in my district in East Texas, well known as an Oklahoma man of principle. But I know Dan. I like Dan. He's a friend. I trust him. And I would expect him not to go make it a matter of politics when to him it's a matter of principle. So this is consistent with who Dan Boren is.
But, you know, at the same time, he was one of 31 Democrats who sent a letter to President Obama last June, and they asked him to direct the Justice Department and to direct Holder to provide all the documents they have, as you said, to congressional investigators, which they haven't done. So what's it going to take to have a Democrat come forward and say, hey, you know what? We don't have confidence in him either. I mean, he says he's not going to comment, but what does that do?
Well, hopefully it will open the door for more Democrats to stand up and say, look, Holder obviously wants to make this a matter of politics, but we see this as bad for America. It's gotten Americans killed. It's made our border in Mexico more dangerous. So maybe it is time. And to be fair, I was one person back in July of 2007 who called the White House after the problem with the national security letters. I knew that Attorney General Gonzalez had nothing to do with authorization of the abuses that happened with the national security letter by the Justice Department. I knew he didn't know about that. But there came a point where it was time to say, you know what, it's time to make a fresh start with somebody that can get a clean look at this, clean things up, and move forward and give America faith in the justice system. And now all we see is that it's becoming more a Department of Injustice than it is a Department of Justice. So I wouldn't ask any Democrat to do any more than I've already been willing to do myself. I did that, and because it was the right thing to do.
And as you
Party
said,
politics aside.
And as you said, this is not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be, at least.
It shouldn't be. This is about American law enforcement, American citizens being put in harm's way because of the absolutely repugnant actions of people within the Justice Department. So if he didn't know, he should have known. And if he should have known and he didn't, and he hasn't done anything to clean it up, he's done nothing but delay and obfuscate, it's time to step aside and let somebody come in who can wrap up this administration's last year of this term with some credibility, not hostility against the Constitution and American lives.
So what do you think's going to happen in November? Sounds like you got a prediction already.
Well, no, I don't know what's going to happen in November, but I do know that the adage is true, that democracy ensures people are governed no better than they deserve. So I know what happens in November, no matter which party wins, is what America as a whole deserves. But I hope and pray that America will deserve better than they've had the last 3 years.
Congressman, I got to ask you, the more that you find out about this Operation Fast and Furious, do you have any doubt what this was about? Was this about advancing President Obama's anti-gun agenda? Do you see it that way?
Well, it may have been for some that were pushing it a chance to maybe track where the guns were going. But then, as a former judge, you start looking for evidence of that. And the fact is, this was not like prior administrations controlled gun sales where they had people there, they had them marked, they followed them, they were ready to seize the people once the transaction looked take. These were not controlled buys. These were just buys where the guns went anywhere. So the evidence seems to be a lot more clear that it was not so much an effort to bring down the drug cartels or the Mexican criminals as it was a chance. I'm sure you've seen the emails, even from the few that have been disclosed. They were looking to make this a chance to have more gun control, more gun regulations, and that is what is so extremely offensive from a legislative standpoint. They were trying to manipulate Congress and the regulators into having more laws, more rules against having the right to bear arms than there were without these illegal acts. It's just outrageous what's going on.
Yeah, and you had
It's time for a fresh start.
Yeah, but you had Vice President in Mexico City just recently joining again with President Calderon and blaming our guns, blaming the guns from the U.S. for the cartel violence in Mexico. We've got a president who apologizes for our Second Amendment.
Yep, he does, and it's why I hope and pray we have both a president and an attorney general who understand the Constitution, understand our rights. They may think the right to bear arms just means the right to wear a short-sleeve shirt. This is about the right of Americans to have guns, to be able to stand up and fight in the event of attack, the same way that the founders did when their rights were taken away. I am not advocating any type of revolution, anything like that. In fact, I'm advocating that we get back away from the you can't even say this is a bloodless revolution. People have lost their lives as this administration has tried to take over and take away people's religious rights, Second Amendment rights, and it's time to say enough is enough. And if the pressure of a November election is not enough to make this president say, hey, sorry, Eric, you're costing me politically. You've made this a political thing. It's time to step aside from me politically. Then I don't know what else could possibly move them.